everybody, and welcome back to our third season of Money Talks. I am your host, Miss Rufo. Joining me today, our senior hosts, Ella Key and Patrick Solomon. It's that time of year again when seniors are ferociously writing college essays and completing applications in the hopes of achieving a piece of the American dream to attend college. If you are planning to attend college in the Northeast, that will cost you, and in some cases nearly twice the average of other regions of the United States. According to a report from Sallie Mae, families in the Northeast typically spend $35,431 for college. That's nearly twice the average amount spent by families in the West, reporting spending of $19,181. The higher price tag here is a result of 40% of Northeasterners attending four-year private schools, where the average annual tuition in the United States is $45,000 or $181,000 for 4 years. And if you think that's bad, wait another 18 years when Vanguard estimates that a four-year college degree at a private college could cost nearly $500,000, $500,000 for a bachelor's degree. What can students and families do to get ahead of the game when it comes to saving for college? And what tips can we give our students to make sound investing decisions? Well, today we are joined by financial advisor, Mr. Robert Key of Greenport Advisory, to help answer these questions. Thank you, Mr. Key, for joining us today. It is a great honor.
Thank you for having me, Nikki.
And welcome. And today we're going to start right away, and I believe Ms. Ella Key will be asking you the very first question.
Yes, to start off, what made you want to help others with financial planning?
I didn't initially go into the financial planning field. What I did was I went into the investment field, and I was always fascinated by investing and figuring out how to make more money out of the money you had. And what I realized through that time of being in the investment field for my first 28 years of my career is that despite the fact that we were investing properly for people, often the people didn't understand or achieve the type of results they should because they were, whether it was a lack of patience or fear or whatever, people would jump in and out of the market and not get the type of returns that they normally would. And I really, after 28 years of doing that, I really wanted to move over to the actual financial planning side and help people one-on-one individually with getting a plan together to achieve their goals, whether it's retirement or education or whatever their goals are.
Very interesting.
So when you're one-on-one with a person, have you ever been nervous about managing their money?
Nervous is not probably the right term, but it's close. I get very concerned about it. The reason why I don't like to use nervous is that we have a well thought out process, which we've proven over 30 years of investing works. The reason why I get concerned is that the secret to achieving financial success is sticking to your plan. And most people greatly underestimate their ability to tolerate volatility and risk. So you can sit down with somebody and explain to them, this is where you're trying to get to, here's our plan to get here, and mathematically we can prove that if you just stick to this plan, you're going to almost certainly achieve it. The challenge we get into is, even though you have this conversation and you're very confident in your investment strategy to get there, once you get going on the plan and we hit these volatile markets or choppy times, or you hear, just the headline news today, we have 24/7 cable news where people are talking about, whether it's North Korea, using nuclear missiles or China trade fears, whatever it is. There's so much, and as people read that, they get fearful and want to change their plan or get out of their plan. So nervous is close to the right word, but not quite the right word, because we're confident in our strategy. Really our biggest challenge and our concern is making sure that the client sticks to their strategy.
I can put in a personal story here because I did exactly what you just said. There was a terrible time in a big recession, right, in 2007 and 8,
Yep.
and my portfolio was tanking, and I met with my advisor, and they said, just stick with it, and I saw all my money draining, and I pulled out. And I said, I'm not sticking, this is unbelievable. And I should have listened, because investing is for the long haul. I mean, if you're at least my investment was for the long haul. And I made that blunder, and I wished I didn't, and it's taken me a long time to recover. But that is an accurate statement, very accurate.
Emotion is generally what they call a contrary indicator, right? When you're the most worried, it's probably the best time to invest, and when you're the most comforted, it's probably the worst time to invest. It is over the long haul. If you look at what we call explanatory power in our models, right? We pretty much have no ability to forecast what's going to happen tomorrow or even over the next week or next month. But we have pretty good explanatory power of what's going to happen over the next year, 5 years, 10 years. The longer we can make that horizon, the more certain we can be of the investment outcome.
Thank you.
It's good to know for the future. On average, how much money does an individual need to make a good investment, would you say?
It's not a dollar amount. I mean, it all depends, how much somebody has and what their goals are. But really, the big thing somebody needs to make investments is they need to have extra or expendable money, right? I mean, if everything you have you need to live off of, then you don't have enough money to invest, right? The basic tenet of capitalism is putting off today's consumption for future profits, right? So the more that you can control how much you're spending today and get some excess money to invest, that's how much, that's what you need to invest. And that's something, again, back to the financial planning part. It's more important to talk to people about this, making sure they set up their lives such that they aren't spending everything they're making, because you need to invest, because investing is kind of, I don't want to say it's free money, but over time it grows, whereas if you're spending all your money, or worse yet, you have debt, it actually detracts. So it's all about kind of getting your personal balance sheet correct. So there's no number too small, it just has to be in excess of what you're spending.
Okay.
So when someone comes out at you with a number, does that change your strategy, whether it's a large number or a small number, your financial strategy?
No. The biggest determinant in our financial strategy is somebody's investment horizon, right? So you guys are seniors in high school. You're going to college next year.
Hopefully.
Well, so there's something called 529 plans, right? College savings plans. We manage a lot of those for people. And on a side note, great vehicles, they grow tax-free because, this is part of this 529 is part of the tax code that allows it to grow tax-free. Now, when you were a baby and and your 529 plan would have been invested such that you said, well, you're a baby, you're going to school in 18 years, so that's an 18-year investment horizon. I can be pretty aggressive with how I invest it, right? You have 18 years to sort of make money here. Right now, you're a junior in high school and probably 17 years old, so that gives you less than a year until we have to write that first check out. So we're going to be much more conservative, right? We move much more into fixed income securities and lower risk securities. So the investment horizon is much more important than the amount of money.
So if I gave you $1,000 as a student, what would you do with that money?
I would ask you what your plans are for that $1,000. Is it something that you need it to pay for your college tuition next year? Or is it something that you're going to save for your wedding day? Is it something you're saving for retirement? What are the plans for that $1,000? If you tell me what the plans are for that $1,000, I can set up a plan to make sure that we maximize the return you can get while minimizing the volatility of that return.
Okay. So if I was to say investing that $100 in just like college money, I guess, how would you take that?
So by college money, you mean you're going to use that money over the next 4 years?
Yes.
That would be a much more conservative investment. It would probably be about 30% stocks and about 70% bonds, and we'd mix it up within that. The reason why a lot of people say, well, why aren't you 100% bonds if someone's that close? A portfolio that's 30% stocks and 70% bonds actually has a higher probability of not losing money over a 1 year period than a 100% bond portfolio. And that's because by having that 30% equity, for instance, this year, despite all the craziness of the markets, the domestic stock market's up about 20% this year. That's a nice cushion to put into people's portfolios. So it's not always about not losing people's money, it's about making people's money. If you make 20% on the equity portion, that pretty much buffers the rest of your portfolio. So you never want to be completely, unless you're really, it's imminent. You need the money 6 months from now. You're buying a new house. Your college tuition is due. You always want to be invested in both stocks and bonds. But the longer the horizon, the more stocks you're going to have. The shorter your horizon, the less stocks you'll have.
Okay.
So in a sort of different light, how is invested money taxed? And are there investment instruments with tax exemptions for students?
There are. So investments are taxed. There's two general components. There's capital gains and there's income component, right? So if you buy a stock, let's say you buy a stock at $100 and it goes to $200 and you sell it, right? That's a $100 capital gain, right? And you pay a capital gains tax on that. Typically, a capital gains tax, especially if it's longer term, is 20%. And then if you're at a higher income level, it can be slightly higher, but it's about a 20%. Whereas if you buy a bond and it pays a coupon or pays interest on that bond gets taxed at your income tax rate, which is typically higher than that capital gains tax rate. So yes, investments, anytime you make money in this country or anywhere else, you get taxed. That's just the way the world works. There's no way to make money without really being taxed. There are things like municipal bonds, where you can buy bonds issued by municipalities, which allows you to get some tax-free income, but those yields are actually lower than the taxable yield, so it kind of all breaks even. But probably the most important thing when you talk about taxable versus non-taxable is what you're saving for. So I'm sure Nikki probably has a 401k or 403b because you're a teacher, right? Right. You have 403b for your
Tax shelter and annuity, separate.
Yeah, there's all sorts of ways. The government has written all sorts of stuff into the tax laws. They want you. Tax law is designed to create incentives. The government wants you to save for your retirement. The reason they want you to save for your retirement is they don't want to have to pay for your retirement if you don't save for your retirement, right? So it's a good thing. Same goes with college education. That's the 529 plan we talked about earlier. You can invest tax-free. Your growth is all tax-free on your 529 plan. So saving for college is tax-free. But if you just had like a regular brokerage account, start and wanted to make money that way, you're going to have to pay taxes. So with the exception of like schooling and retirement, pretty much everything gets taxed.
What happens if you don't use that money for college? You say, oops, you know what, I don't think I want to, I think maybe I want to open up a business somewhere and you've already put that money aside.
So typically, so 529 plan is actually a really fascinating vehicle. It really is. Typically, a 529 plan is going to be created by the parents or some sort of a rich uncle or something, right? It's the child themselves aren't creating it, right? So the 529 plan, the way it's designed, it's created such that, unlike uniform gift to minors or something like that, it's not actually the child's. Let's say you create a 529 plan for your child, right? That's not your child's money. It remains your money. Okay. So at any point in time, your child decides, I'm not going to college. I'm going to start a band. I bought a bus and I'm taking off. You can say that's nice, but this money, you're not getting this money, right? Whereas previously, when you saved money for a child, it was a uniform trust to minors or uniform gift to minors. And it was their money. If they turned 18, they could just take it and go. So you remain in control of the money. That's a really important point. And then they made the law broad enough that if, come college time, your child doesn't want to go to college or whatever, you can take that money. If you just take it and say, well, then I'm keeping it for myself, then you get taxed on. You just get taxed on the gains like as you regularly would. But you can transfer it. If you have another child, you can transfer the money to that child. You have a niece or nephew or a friend. You can send the money wherever you want. But the other thing they've done is they've made it's allowed for any accredible school. So let's say your child wanted to go to a trade school. Let's say he wanted to become a golf pro, right? Going to go to golf academy. You could do that. Let's say you want to shift into your name and take music lessons to become a concert pianist, right? If that was, an accredited school, you could do that. So it's pretty broad how you can use that money. The big answer is it's your money. You get it back. You certainly don't lose it. Worst case scenario is you have to pay tax on the gains if you're taking it out and just using it for everyday purposes and not education. Mm-hmm.
It's good to know that the parents' money, it's always the parents' money.
It's incredible. And that's a big part of that law being put into place was that previously there was really a disincentive, to put money away into a child's trust because it was the child's money and the child could ultimately do whatever they want. I mean, it's, and a lot of 529 plans aren't necessarily parents. Often there's really wealthy family members that want to set them up for all their nieces and nephews, whatever it is, right? But you want to have recourse. Mm-hmm. It's what, unlike an irrevocable trust where that money, you've given it, it's gone.
Right.
It retains, it's still your money.
Remember that, guys, with your trust accounts, okay?
Got it.
So as a student, I'm going into the real world soon enough. I'm a senior in high school. how can I help build up my credit score? Like, what are ways to start? Or
If you think college is the real world, first of all, we need to re-examine that. College is no more the real world.
Pretty soon.
You still have 4 more
I'm
years to go
closer enough,
before the real world. Building up a credit score is one of these. I actually get annoyed with other advisors that talk about building up credit scores. Because generally the way you build up a credit score is to have debt. Having debt's generally not a good idea, right? Now you build up your credit score by having debt and paying your debt off or something. So the most I would ever recommend somebody to do in that situation, assuming you don't need to take on debt, sometimes you have to take on debt for school, whatever it is. If you wanted to have a credit card or something like that, where you're definitely going to pay your bill each month and pay it off so you're not paying interest on it, and all that, fine. But you need to have the discipline to do that. Don't get a credit card and start carrying credit card, 18% interest on the balance and all that sort of stuff. But as far as increasing your credit score, reality is you're not going to have that much of a credit score until you're older and start buying houses and cars and all those sorts of things. But I think one of the worst pieces of advice I hear out there is how you have to take out loans to develop a credit score, because to purposely take on debt is just, in my mind, a very bad idea. You're paying money instead of receiving money, right?
yeah.
So unless you need loans, unless you need money, do not go into debt. So I think the answer to you right now is don't worry about your credit score right now.
Okay. Sounds good.
So talking about debt, we're going to college next year. Obviously very expensive, as Ms. Rufo mentioned. To what extent is it worth it to go to college and take up student debt?
Well, I guess everybody's situation is going to be very, very different. I mean, are you asking from you don't have the money to go to college?
Yeah,
Otherwise?
if you're taking out a student loan
so,
or such.
Again, it greatly depends on, it's a fantastic question. I'll tell you why it's a fantastic question, is that one of the major issues we're dealing with, and this is a very personal issue to people, is that everybody wants their kids to go to college, right? And I'm sure this high school, like a lot of high school, touts how high the percentage of kids, 98% of our kids go off to college or whatever it is. The evidence is overwhelming that that number probably shouldn't be 98%. And for whatever reason, in my opinion, there's been a little bit of a stigma put on not going to college. You can go to a trade school, you can go to a vocational school. If college is not your passion, right, there's plenty of people that want to do other things other than go to college, and those are very viable ways to make a living. Talk to master electricians right now, they're making a small fortune in the trades about what they're doing. So when we talk with parents who have saved their whole life, who have never spent any money on their own family or on themselves or anything else, they've worked their whole lives to pay off their mortgage, and now they're going to take a bunch of equity out of the house to pay for their kid who's a C- student and isn't really that interested in college to go spend $50,000 or $60,000 a year to go someplace that they're probably not going to go to for more than a year or two. I'd say that's a really bad decision to that family, right? So it's an individual. Now we have other people whose kids are really driven and are, have always been great students and really have a passion to do something, become a doctor or whatever it is, and it's going to cost them a lot of money, and they're going to have to take out equity from their home to pay for the college, and I tell them, well, that's probably a good decision. So, again, that's more of a personal conversation you have with people, but if I was going to, I want to get to the heart of your question because I think it's such an important, incredibly important question. It's probably one of the worst things people are doing from a financial planning perspective in our country today is thinking that everybody has to go spend a bunch of money to go to college, even when they don't really want to go to college. That's my, so it's a personal conversation for everybody, but I've seen a lot of poor decisions made in that area. Nikki started talking at the beginning at the average cost of a school. At $50,000 a year, you better, it better be something you want to do in life, not just a place to hang out for a year or two.
It's nice to hear you say that there are other options after high school too, because I really feel that students may be pushed to go to college and it may not be the best choice for them. And it may not, financially speaking, they probably know deep down in their hearts, hey, I don't know if this is right for me. So why take out a $50,000 or $100,000 loan for 2 years of school with no degree at the end when ultimately they have a passion to do something else and are going to be more successful doing that than attending college?
Absolutely. I mean, we talk to the parents, and it's interesting because you're saying the child might have a passion to go to school, and the parents kind of see it, and we're having very personal conversations. Parents feel a certain stigma in today's society about not sending their child to college, which, I get it. I mean, I do understand that there's a stigma, just like there's everybody wants to say their kid's going to Harvard and Yale and everything else. So it's a very individual conversation, but if I was to aggregate your question and say society as a whole, this is where we've got this thing really messed up right now. The amount of money we're paying for a lot of people to go to college, that just that's not where they should be going, or they certainly shouldn't be spending that sort of money. Shouldn't be looking at being $100,000 in debt as a 20-year-old. It's nonsensical to me.
Switching it up a little bit, do you invest in the stock market at all? And if so, what are your favorite stocks?
We do invest in the stock market. So our general investment strategy is one that
Or do you personally invest in the stock market?
Yes, we personally, and we do for our clients, but we try to de-emphasize individual securities and really try to emphasize broad market exposures, right? That helps us eliminate the risk of, Facebook last month, for instance, dropped 30% because, of a bad earnings number, right? I would much rather spread people out over many stocks, what they call exchange-traded funds right now, or ETFs, where we get broad market exposures, whether it's, in that case, the technology sector or whatever, we can do that. It's a much cheaper way to invest for them, and it's just much more efficient as far as achieving the returns. So that said, we do buy individual stocks. We generally continue to like the companies that are throwing off higher revenues and higher growth. And despite like the extended valuations and a lot of the Amazons and Facebooks, what they call the FANG stocks, Apple, Netflix, Google, that still seems to be I think that's where you're going to still continue to see the most growth going forward, because that's, while manufacturing's made somewhat of a comeback over the last few years, the manufacturing sector is still, not really where the true growth is. It tends to be more in the technology and that side of the market.
So when you look at your phone and you're always checking the stocks to see if it's going up or down, what does that do for your, what does that have to do with your stocks or show?
If they go up, we make more money. If they go down, we make less.
No, I know, but you're constantly checking. Does that change, what you do with the money in the stocks? Or
It really doesn't. It's we monitor. We're monitoring markets. Generally speaking, we trade the portfolios once a month. We try not to trade based on headlines or headline news, because those
Marathon, and I was wondering, in terms of fiscal responsibility, what's your investment philosophy?
Ends up not really panning out. No, we're checking more out of curiosity, and quite simply, we're checking probably most so, not because we're going to change the portfolios around, because we're going to get client calls asking us about how's this doing, why is this down, why is this up, etc. And we just kind of have to be on top of that from an answering standpoint.
Okay.
So what aspects of society can affect the stock market, such as politics or anything like that?
Well, I mean, I guess any aspect can affect it. We see it every day, based on headline news. Ultimately, the only things that matter in our mind, how our process is, and it's been a successful process for a long time, is what are the earnings of a company and what multiple is that earnings being priced at? And there's a few other things in there. If it's a low inflation environment, you should generally have a higher multiple. If it's a higher inflation or a higher interest rate environment, maybe a lower multiple, et cetera. But the stock market at its most basic level is just a discounting mechanism, right? So if I said to you today, Patrick, I have a company that's going to produce $1 a year for the next 10 years, and then my company blows up, right? So that would mean you're going to make $10, correct? How much you want to pay me for that company? What would you say to me?
Not much.
Well, what would you know? What would be a realistic number? I give you $1 a year for the next 10 years. So how much money are you going to give me for that company?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Well, I'll get to so that's $10 you're going to get, right? Because you
Yeah.
get $1 a year for 10 years, but you're not going to give me $10, right?
Yeah.
Because a dollar in the future isn't worth as much as a dollar now, right? That you have to discount those dollars at some point. So maybe you'd add that up and you'd say, well, if I discount all these dollars at 20%, I'll give you $5 today for $1 a year for the next 10 years. So you give $5 and then your $5 would double in 10 years, right? That's what the earnings of a company are. That's how we think about earnings. And so right now, if we look at earnings, despite all the headlines and everything else, we keep hitting record earnings in our stock market right now, and our earnings are trading at about 17 times the annual earnings right now. So people pay about 17 times their annual earnings. And that's a very reasonable number, especially given the low inflation environment and the lack of alternatives out there. That's ultimately what drives the market. Now, I understand headlines, every day we pop on the cable news or we hear this or that, and markets fly up and down and all that. We don't play that game. That's the traders playing that game. That's a lot of the new algorithms and momentum traders in there, kind of, program trading we call it, flying up and down, all that. Our process really does not care about headlines at all. We just look strictly the fundamentals. So, what you're earning, where you're priced at, what's that earnings growth look like, et cetera.
Well, we, as you know, are in a live studio audience. Yes. And I know there are audience members who would like to ask you a few questions.
Very good.
So if we could have a few of those audience members, thank you.
Hi, I'm Jack, and I'm wondering, as a teenager, do you have any tips for achieving financial freedom, like independent from your parents or anything?
Jack, I'm 53 and I have not achieved financial freedom yet. If that makes you feel any better, so don't put too much pressure on yourself. I do. I actually have a very, I have one tip that I've used it with my own children. Textbooks are incredibly important. I, have the background, the degrees and all that. I think the greatest thing you can do as a teenager, go home and ask your parents to open up a brokerage account for you, okay? Don't have to put much in it. You really don't, doesn't have to be a ton of money. It can be a very small amount of money. But that forces you to actually, and then you have to go in there yourself and figure out how you want to invest it. Now, even if it's a very, very, very small amount of money, you can do this. But once it's your own money, you get a certain interest to it that you're not going to have by reading a textbook or even in a, when you get to college. I don't think, do you guys have trading rooms here and stuff like that, or is that like they have what they call paper portfolios and trading, where it's fun, but it's still academic. Once it's your own money, Jack, it's amazing how much more attention you're going to pay to it. That would be my number one advice to you and for parents. And again, does not have to be a lot of money. You can open a brokerage account with very, very little money, but all of a sudden you're going to start paying a lot more attention to what stocks you like and how to invest that money. That's something I've done with my children, and I recommend a lot of people do that.
Hi, I'm Barathon, and I was wondering, in terms of fiscal responsibility, what's your investment philosophy?
You say fiscal responsibility, we're talking about at the macro government level, fiscal policy?
No. I mean, as individually, economically.
Oh, well, fiscally, when we think about spending, right, so fiscal kind of gets to I guess that financial planning piece, but everyone's always going to tell you don't spend more money than you have, right? And it's good advice, sort of. Not great advice, though. I believe when you're younger, you're going to spend more money than you have, almost by definition. If you're going to college, unless you got a couple $100,000 on you, you're probably going to spend more money than you have, right? And that's what it matters. What you have to do fiscally is, again, you're never too young to do these sorts of things. What we do, anytime we have a business plan or anything else, we develop a model and we say, what is the ROI or return on that investment, right? So fiscally, anytime you're going to spend money, because you're spending more than you have, and even in your 20s after you graduate and all that, you're probably going to go rent an apartment in Boston or do whatever you're going to do, you're not really saving a whole lot at that point in time. And that's, I have no problem with that because you're growing. I don't think it's always about, trying to move back in and save your last nickel at first. I think you're trying to grow your life. But fiscally, you always have to ask yourself, what's my ROI? So for college, for instance, if you say, I'm going to spend $50,000 a year to go to college, and I've got this job I'm going to line up, which I really love, and it's going to pay me $35,000 a year when I graduate, and I get a 5% increase each year for the next however many years. And then it's okay. So you start doing that out, and you realize that your break even on that is 32 years on that college investment, right? I'd say that that's probably not a good decision then. And again, I'm speaking strictly, in fairness, I'm speaking strictly from a monetary standpoint. If you have a passion, the reality of this world is that if poetry is your passion, you're not going to be rich. Maybe when you're dead you will be, but you're not going to be rich while you're alive, right? And so I don't want to say, don't pursue poetry or whatever your passion is, but if you're asking me strictly from a fiscal standpoint, I look at my personal ROI. I would say, look at what your ROI, what is the return you expect to get on every dollar you spend?
Hello, my name is Liz, and I was just wondering what your favorite part of your job is.
Client interaction is my favorite part of the job. Liz, so I can't really see you there, but it's, I spent 28 years at Putnam Investments. I ran a successful investment group there, and one of the things that, when I look back on, I'm very grateful for it. I had a wonderful time. One of the most challenging things in hindsight was that I seldom got to meet the end user because we ran such a big group, right? We sold all our products through advisors, and the actual person, the person who was actually using our product, I very seldom met. And now, doing what I'm doing, I get to meet with people firsthand. It makes it much more personal. You understand. I've always understood it, but you very much understand. When someone's talking to you about their 14-year-old daughter that wants to go to school in 4 years, and here's the money they've set aside for it, and they need, it becomes very, very personal, and you get to understand the situation a lot better. I definitely enjoy that part of it, and seeing the success, right? When you get to that point when they go to school and you say, look, this is our plan. You said we're going to put this much money in. Now you've got this much, and now your child can go to college. That to me is very satisfying.
Hi, my name is Jake, and I was just wondering, what is your favorite stock or favorite type of stock to invest in right now?
Yeah, so Jake, thanks. We kind of hit on that a little bit earlier. I still like a lot of the technology stocks that are out there. They're sort of the ones that are growing the fastest from a revenue standpoint. When you look at stocks, there's, we talk about earnings all the time. What earnings are revenues minus expenses. Sometimes earnings undertell the story. And one reason why we look at revenues is that when you're growing, right, like Amazon, oddly enough, doesn't really have earnings or very good earnings. But their revenue is enormous, and all they would have to do at any point in time is cut back on their capital expenditures, and they would be incredibly profitable, right? Which is much easier to do that than to create revenue. Right? Anybody can kind of cut expenses by definition, but creating revenue is very difficult. So we look at those companies that really have a high revenue. I'll extrapolate a little bit on that. If you said to me, what's kind of the next area, right? We've had the whole internet.com. We've had all this. Everybody knows that. I think the next boom we're going to have, the next big thing. If you think about our lives, right? Think of how much it's changed. You guys are too young probably to remember all the changes, but certainly we remember a few more of them. Like before internet and before cell phones, etc. It has to be transportation. We're basically still, cars have gotten better and all that sort of stuff. We're sitting in the same traffic we were sitting in 30 or 40, 50 years ago. We're sitting on the same airplanes we were sitting in. Transportation really hasn't progressed at all in our society. In fact, it's gotten worse as far as, if you look at the wait time in traffic and all that. And that's an area that I think is probably going to be the next real change in our society, is that we're going to somehow figure out a way from a transportation perspective, whether it's these hyperloops that they're talking about or something like that. We're going to figure out a way to move people around quicker than we're currently doing, because we're really, it's amazing given society how much we've progressed, that we're really, from a transportation perspective, have not really progressed at all. We're driving nicer cars, but it's taken us longer to get there.
Well, thank you, Mr. Key, for being here. It was great to have you, and I know our students have learned a good amount from you today, and hopefully they can take some of your tips, bring them home, have discussions with their parents, and be successful human beings in the future. Not that they can't already be, like these two fine teenagers. So thank you again. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Have a good day.